Hello, I'm Judy Stiles. Thank you for joining us this week on Newsmakers. Well, November's a time when people think about Thanksgiving and the holidays and the end of the year, but it's also a time of year when there's focus on homeless awareness. Today we're focusing on homelessness in this community and projects underway to help people. And joining me, we have three representatives, Debbie Markman, Tammy and Louise Secker. And you're with the Homeless Coalition involved here in the Joplin region. So in this next half hour, I'd like to talk a little bit about that as well as what we're talking about in homelessness in Joplin. But maybe we need to start off with why November. You know, people say, well, why is this the time of year when people are talking about it?
Sure. So one of the reasons this is an awareness is there's a national movement to introduce, I think, our general public to just being aware of hunger and homelessness. And we here are representing the Homeless Coalition, so that's something that's kind of near and dear to our hearts to just make sure people are aware of homelessness and in Jasper and Newton County. What does that look like? And then, you know, what can we do as a community to help to kind of end homelessness in our two-county area?
So a big goal is public awareness, making people aware, and then of course dealing with the problems that result from that, tying together. So the Homeless Coalition, how would you define that? Someone says, what is this organization?
Well, the Homeless Coalition is basically a group of providers of services to homeless people in our area. So it's some of the ones you would normally think about, like our homeless shelters, the ones who actually provide emergency shelter. But then we have really a membership of about 25 organizations, I think now, who provide maybe some of what you think of as support services. Legal Aid of Western Missouri, who provides legal services, is in our group. The school district is a participant. And then Lafayette House, for instance, which provides services specifically for domestic violence victims. Ozark Center, which provides mental health services. The two hospitals. So it really runs the gamut of people who are interested in providing either emergency shelter or other forms of support or housing along the continuum for people who are facing homelessness.
So these are people who are dealing with the people who are affected, the homeless, and a daily, perhaps sometimes a daily basis.
Exactly. And I think the diversity of our membership probably shows that homelessness isn't just one face, like you know, people might think of it as though someone that they see living on the street. But the organizations who are involved in the Homeless Coalition are really geared toward not only helping those who are already homeless, but people who are maybe on the verge of it, trying to divert that and prevent families from becoming homeless. So so we really have a big continuum of providers.
Working together. Well, how would we define homeless? I mean, people think of homeless, I think if somebody has absolutely no place to go, but how do you define that in terms of working with the community?
For a lot of the programs, they receive a variety of different funding sources, and that might be particular to the funding source. But when we're talking about homelessness, you're talking about someone who is literally homeless, living on the street in their car, unsheltered in the woods or in an emergency shelter. Homelessness can also be a family fleeing domestic violence. That is in the definition as well. There is a third definition that covers families that are getting ready to be evicted from their home within 14 days. So it's not a simple definition at that.
Now the aspect of hunger comes into it as well. So how do you define people that are hungry, or how that role?
Well, we have an organization called Joplin Food Network, and they're actually kind of dealing with food insecurity issues. And so often what we usually think about is children, especially in Jasper County, have probably more opportunity to be food secure. And you have to think about that as like when school isn't going on in the summer. The kids aren't getting that free and reduced breakfast or free and reduced lunch. And so those are going to be specific times or holidays when families, a lot of times like Thanksgiving's a big push because a lot of times it takes quite a bit of money to have Thanksgiving dinner, right?
It's an involved meal, right?
Right. So if folks are on food stamps, they may use quite a bit of their food stamps getting that Thanksgiving meal put together. And so either the beginning of the month or the end of the month, they may not have enough money for food. And so I think this is part of the reason that you see homelessness and hunger awareness kind of being coupled together around Thanksgiving.
The time of year when people are reaching out to help others as well, and tying all of that together. People who are watching might be wondering, well, what is the scope of the situation in the Joplin region? Do we have statistics, and we, say, well, how big is the problem? I guess.
Well, we do a point-in-time count 2 times a year. The count that we had in January showed that we had 297 individuals that were literally homeless. That means they're living in a shelter or transitional housing program, or they're living unsheltered outside or in a car. That's total individuals. That's up from last year, so we've seen a slight increase. About 55 of that 297 are children. So it's not just a single individual, although that's the largest population that we have. It's about 71% of our population are single individuals, single women or single men. So that's for our 2-county area, Jasper and Newton County. And when we do the count, we're reaching out to law enforcement to try to identify where people are living outside to count. We have a Homeless Connect event to draw people in so that we can survey them and find out their needs, as well as doing what we call a service-based count, where we're actually trying to count people that are coming in to have a hot meal, like at Souls Harbor or any of the meal places.
Outreach places. Now I know we have some photos that were provided, and it shows some of the, I guess, on location things that you find when you're looking. So if we can come up with some of the photos, and I think actually this is from one of your events. Is this correct?
Yeah, our Project Homeless Connect event. We try to get providers together that will give goods away, as well as try to enroll them in programs, give them housing resources. In the winter, we collect coats and toiletry bags and whatnot.
Now this is something we'll be seeing here shortly here in the studio, but this is actually a coat that turns into a sleeping bag, and you
Yes.
provide these for people who
Yes.
are without a place to stay as well. So this was a kind of a one-stop location for people to come to.
It's very handy. It brings in all the providers so that they can come in. We usually have snacks or a meal. We survey everyone that comes through the door to find out what their needs are, and then they can enroll for services. We've had healthcare providers on site to give flu shots and take blood pressure checks. Just a little bit of everything is offered, for something that they might actually need.
Now here we have some scenes in the outdoors. Would this be an example? You say people living outdoors.
Yes, yeah. We go to a lot of wooded areas where many times we don't encounter the people, but we encounter their belongings, tents, makeshift areas where they're sleeping,
There's a tent in the woods. So this helps you in that count. Then you see where people are actually staying outdoors.
Yes, we have a lot of known locations between Jasper and Newton County, so we already sort of know from year to year where to go, but then we reach out to other organizations and law enforcement so that we can try to identify new areas that we might need to include so that we get a really good count. We want to make sure that we talk to or leave information for everyone so that they know how to access services, number one, and that we have an accurate count for our area.
So is that one of the biggest challenges, is just getting people, reaching the people, talking to the people who are affected?
It can be, depending on when we count. When we do our point-in-time count in July, people are a little more transient. It's nicer outside. Right. I think being on I-44, we get a lot of people just passing through. So just keeping up year to year where people are at is difficult.
Tying that together. We have a lot of programs, and talk a little bit more about what you have to offer through these agencies and organizations of people. There are perhaps sometimes emergency situations where someone becomes homeless.
Right, and there are several things that we can do, I think, to also in that prevention area of trying to prevent homelessness. There are services available such as utility assistance on an emergency basis, so that might be something that you might not think of, but those are important programs too. So the organizations that are involved in the Homeless Coalition provide a variety of things. We talked about the emergency shelter, and that's obviously if someone is homeless and needs a place to stay immediately. But we look at homelessness too as sort of a continuum. So there's emergency shelter, which is kind of the highest crisis level of care. But we also have some transitional housing programs in our area, which is after we've sort of addressed that immediate crisis with a family or an individual. What can we do then to ensure that their housing is stable for the longer term when they're out of a shelter. So there's transitional housing, and then obviously the goal is to move everybody into permanent housing that they can keep. And some of that takes wraparound services. Oftentimes people, a percentage of the people who are counted as homeless here suffer from mental illness, or they suffer with substance abuse. We talked about domestic violence being one of the categories. So the supportive services are important as well. Once we get somebody housed or into the right housing program, then to provide those services like substance abuse treatment or physical health care, mental health care, those kind of wraparound services that will then help them achieve that stability of being successful in transitional housing and eventually permanent housing.
So really it's a step-by-step process people are working through.
Yeah.
For our count, I was just going to add, she had said the mental health and substance abuse. About 28% of our families are have a substance abuse issue, and about 23% of mental illness. So those are pretty high numbers for our area, considering we're only talking about 300 people.
Right, so it impacts a lot of people, the percentage-wise. when we look at the problems.
And I see you have written down too, another subpopulation is veterans, and veteran homelessness is definitely a problem. Is that our number? I think about 20% locally are veterans. So there are some programs that are very specific to helping veterans. We work with the VA out of Southwest Missouri, Mount Vernon, as well as Catholic Charities has a program that addresses specifically veteran homelessness. So there are some kind of niche programs that address certain subpopulations that might have more unique needs, I guess.
But in many cases, just making people aware that we have these programs to help you.
Absolutely. I think that's critical that we always keep people aware. Sometimes it's hard for folks to understand that we are, really taking folks that are homeless. So the prevention aspect, before somebody becomes homeless, many of the organizations here don't really have funds available to help folks to try to prevent that. So it gets a little bit hard for the public sometimes to understand that we're not telling somebody to necessarily become homeless, because we don't want that to happen. But when folks need rental assistance, we have small pots of money. I mean, a lot of times we can help maybe 8 families a month.
So you're limited on how much you can actually do that step to keep them from ending up in the homeless situation.
Yes. So prevention is one of the areas on our continuum that we have a limited access, and some of it has to do with the cost of rent in Jasper and Newton County. It's very high, and to sustain a single person in a 1-bedroom home, a lot of times is in the neighborhood of 10 to like $10-15 an hour. And when you think that what the minimum wage is, it's that doesn't really, it's kind of disjointed.
You're making this, but it costs this much.
Yeah.
So do you work closely with governmental agencies that when they look at, community needs for housing and things like that and resources along those lines?
Oh, of course. Missouri Housing Development Commission, they have funding available for assistance for prevention services, and they're an active member of our homeless coalition. They come down from Kansas City to join our meetings, as well as they help coordinate the statewide point-in-time counts. So we work really closely with them so that every area in the state is counted, and it's counted on the same day. So we have a really close relationship with them.
Now, you mentioned earlier children. People may not think about, if you have a family, a child, that child still perhaps needs to go to school as well. So do you have those challenges as someone may be in a homeless situation, but their children need to go to a school?
Well, we do have, yes, that's always a challenge. Luckily, we do have in place some legislation that allows children that do become homeless to attend their home school. And school districts do have the responsibility to provide that transportation for that child, especially if it's for their best interest. And so that's a real positive that we have, working with the schools to make sure that that child is maintained in that home environment or that homeschool environment.
So you have resources through the schools to help with children who are facing challenges, like you said, during the school year, a lot of programs in place to help them out.
We do.
Right. Well, let's talk about the activities in November and the focus. For John Q. Public, people are curious, well, what's going to happen that week? How can they learn more? What kind of some examples of things that you have happening that week?
Well, most of the information that we do is usually social media, and we also do some things within each of our agencies. So some of us may be collecting food, whether that's maybe a department in an agency or a whole organization. Other agencies may be putting together personal hygiene kits for homeless folks. We do a lot of education. With our agency at Economic Security, we use our Twitter account to do a lot of education during that week about homelessness and hunger awareness, and how do you get involved with what you can do with some simple things. And the Homeless Coalition usually puts up during those 9 days kind of an example of different things that people can do each day, which includes first getting educated about that. If you don't know about it, then you kind of want to learn about it. So we usually provide them with a couple of websites, and hopefully they'll go and learn a little bit about homelessness.
Now, you mentioned a website. You do have a Homeless Coalition website, so as we're talking, maybe we could show that as well.
Oh, great. And we also have a Facebook page, so if people are curious about information about that, we can put that up. And I think it'll include, probably closer to that week, just some real specifics, like Deb said, not only about sort of learning about homelessness and understanding what it is, but some really specific tips, like what can you do if you're confronted by someone who's homeless, and some ideas of interacting with them, and some things that you can do, such as carrying fast food certificates with you that you might provide if you want to provide food. We've got a nice, we call it a Pocket Pal that Economic Security developed, and it's got a list of all the resources for someone who's homeless.
Okay.
The shelters and the different supportive organizations, and then just, I think, encouraging people to volunteer and really see what the face of it is locally. You can serve food or collect food, or there are several ways you could volunteer during that week or during the month. And several of them I think are kid friendly. I mean, it's something that the whole family could do, so that everybody's aware of what the face of homelessness looks like here, and the ways to help.
out. And the website you were showing is where people can go to get that information. And
Right.
a lot of times.
Right. We have a lot of the organizations have different types of programs, like transitional housing, where they may have an apartment that an organization could adopt or sponsor.
Okay.
So that allows them to be involved with not only in a one-time, but they can also have a relationship with that family and help them. One of the things I know that a lot of the churches do with Economic Security transitional housing is at Christmas they'll offer a child care opportunity. So that family can go out and do a little Christmas shopping, and the kids aren't aware of what's going on, so it's kind of more secretive. But and that helps families building relationships, and I think that's really what our families need, is to build relationships. Often, a lot of our families don't, or individuals don't have relationships, so they don't have social capital. So, I mean, how do you get that? Well, you start one at a time, so that one person can build relationships.
So one person can make a difference in reaching out and working with someone.
Very much
Yes.
so.
In today's society, we hear a lot, of course, of mobile society, like say people, moving, even if not transient, people moving a lot. Is it hard? Sometimes people don't have any family in town to help them out in many cases, so they have
We
to.
see that all the time. I mean, there's many reasons you can become homeless, loss of a job or income, or an untreated mental illness or substance abuse or domestic violence. But, many people are a paycheck away from becoming homeless, and if they don't have a support system to fall back on, a friend or family member they could stay with or get help from, they become homeless. Many of the families that we deal with don't have a good relationship, a good positive relationship.
So you have to deal with those people that have had that developing situation, as well as we mentioned earlier, the emergency. Suddenly something's happened and they're without
Yes.
that.
Right.
And tying that together. You have some materials here in front of us. I want to explain for the audience what's all over the desk so they can see what we have, but you have some books. Explain how this ties into helping educate and work with the community.
Sure. We, over the years, the Homeless Coalition has been around for 30 years. So it's not new. It's been around a long time. And so we've accrued a variety of materials over the years. And so some of the materials we have are books to try to help educate the public. And so the Institute of Children in Poverty have put together a number of books here. There's a book that another gentleman put together that's 54 ways to help the homeless. So it's just giving you some tips. What can you do when you don't know? And then we have some poetry that was written by a man that was homeless, and all the proceeds from the books. There were 2 shelters. One was in Denver, Colorado, and then another was the kitchen in Springfield, which is closed now. But the proceeds went to that, and he got help for that, so he gave back. And again, the coat we have, homeless folks are putting those together. There's Lucinda's pens, where she puts together pins for homeless folks, and all that money goes back into helping homeless, because she was homeless herself. So there's a lot of folks that are paying it forward. And then for children, we have some books here that kind of introduce that homelessness in a little different way for them to understand how that would happen, and how somebody might feel about that.
So educational for all levels that are dealing really to understanding. And you have your little blue packs of cards. Explain what we have here.
This is our Housing Connect. Our Homeless Coalition created what is called a coordinated entry process. It's a community-wide process for someone who is literally homeless that needs to access housing. They can go and see Shauna, she's our employee, go through our Housing Connect office, be assessed, find out what their needs are. And what we do locally with all of our housing opportunities that we have set aside for homeless individuals is that we prioritize people for that housing, so that we're serving the most in need, someone that might be chronically homeless. The assessment process, asks a lot of different questions to find out, how long they've been homeless, what their needs are, really see, what kind of housing, might be best for them, whether it's just rental assistance or if it's permanent supportive housing, which has a case management component where someone follows up with them and helps them maintain that housing. So we've had this process for about a year now. It's very successful. I think our only, problem that we're seeing is that we're running out of housing opportunities.
So
we have
shortage
more
of
people,
facilities.
yes, that need housing, and not enough housing opportunities, not enough rent assistance and vouchers to serve everyone that has a need.
So you're seeing the need and the demand not necessarily working out evenly in many situations.
And that happened very early on, the first few months of assessing individuals for those housing opportunities that we didn't have enough locally.
Now, taking that information, does that help you when you go to, whether it's legislators or people who make decisions on funding, to present that evidence, that information? We need more help?
Oh, definitely. We use that information in grants that we're going to write. And just locally with, the city of Joplin, letting them know, we need more affordable housing opportunities for low-income people.
So when the city has the process of affordable housing that's working with the state for funding and so forth, they have those figures going into it to say, yes, we still have that need.
Yes.
And we can reach out to, our landlords who have housing units as well. If a landlord wants to give a chance to a homeless individual, they could... there's a variety of ways to do that. Maybe they could half the rent, or maybe they could think, so if that's their passion and they want to help, and you have a housing unit, I think there's ways that you could help with that without necessarily having to have more government funding. I think we could.
So it doesn't have to all go through a government channel to help people. You're working
Yes.
around that way. So
Right.
forth, right. Well, Louise, when you're looking at organizations such as Lafayette House, where you have more gender-specific assistance, are you finding more needs in that area as well?
We are. So domestic violence is classified as, like Tammy said, one of those definitions of homelessness. I mean, if you don't have a safe place to live, you're considered homeless. So the women and families that we serve at Lafayette House specifically, we're really trying to work with them to do emergency shelter, which we provide, but then the support services such as, we offer child care, for instance. We have a licensed child care center on site because that's always a need. Some job training, a job training program through our resale shop, so that we can kind of go along that continuum, like Deb talked about, to transitional housing and then eventually permanent housing that's safe and stable. So that's one of our long-term goals for them. Mm-hmm.
So working together, and that's with the women and their children and the family situation there
Yes,
as
definitely.
well.
Yeah,
tying
they
together.
really direct their own care. Mm-hmm.
Well, you mentioned the care kits. If people are interested in donating items, you can go online. You can find a specific list of things that people can give you that you can put together in this kit that you were talking about.
Yes, during the November 12th, that'll probably be one of the first or second items that we'll actually put up is just, how can you help after we do an education. And so we'll actually be providing a homeless supply list, and so it'll have things that either an individual family could do, a church, school, youth group, any of our organizations within any of our 22 homeless coalition organizations. You'll find that they'll also bring together some of these personal hygiene items, because it's things that, we always think of shampoo and toothpaste, but we don't always think about thermal socks and maybe a food gift card, bottled water. When you don't have a place to go, finding potable water can be very challenging if you can't get into a facility to fill up your water jugs. So sometimes it's just kind of thinking about those things, and we like to put them all together in a kit, so again we can put them together. One of the things we got last January was Royal Heights Bright Futures Site Council is all kids, and they put together 85 of these personal hygiene kits. It was really kind of awe-inspiring to know that so many kids were so excited about, and that was for them, that was on their list. We want to help with homelessness, and that's how they got involved. So it was pretty exciting.
So someone who's watching is interested, they can contact any of you and
Yes.
say, how can we do this?
Absolutely.
Right. So that's the other question. People say, how can I get in touch with the people who are helping? What's the best way to reach you? Is it through your website, or what do you recommend?
Both of us, I know at the Economic Security Corporation's website, we've got to contact us, and Tammy's Walker and my name are both there. You can just click on it and email us and just tell us what you want. We'll help you figure it out, and let Louise talk about how
Best way to reach you if you need it.
Same thing. So Lafayette House has a website, obviously, and then for Homeless Coalition, if you're on Facebook and would like to like our page, it does keep up to date pretty well with the activities that are going on and any events we have, so you could always message through the Facebook page as well.
Great. Well, I'd like to thank the three of you for coming today, sharing some information for our audience. And I also want to tell the audience as we close, we have in the studio, see on the wide shot, one of the sleeping bag coats that you were talking about. So we had a picture of it, but lets them see it in person. It's a coat that basically someone can turn into a sleeping bag at night to sleep in.
Yes, it folds out, and they can sleep in it in the evening time, and it'll roll up inside of the coat, and they can wear it or roll it up as like a pillow, and they can carry it on their shoulder.
Great. Well, thank you for being here today. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you for having us.
You're
Appreciate
welcome.
it.
And thank you for joining us this week on Newsmakers. I'm Judy Stiles. We'll see you again next week at the same time.